My name is Therese McMurray, and I got involved with Dad's Army and David Croft after David had become a fan of mine when I was a soap star in Emergency Room 10. And when I left, David asked me to guest in Hugh and I Spy, and we became good friends. And then he took me out to dinner, and he said, I've got a new pilot called Dad's Army. I said, oh, okay. And he said, I'm very worried I'm not getting enough support from the BBC. I really want to have my friends around me. Now, would you just do some small parts? I said, David, but he said, don't ego. I'm asking you as a favour, and I'll get you a special high category fee. All right, David. And that is how I got introduced to playing the little vignettes in 3 episodes of Dad's Army. And it was great fun to be in at the beginning and to be supporting David and Jimmy then, who I got to meet when we were first on set. So we travelled by train down to location, down to Thetford, and were set up in a hotel. And the first episode that I was involved in was called Shooting Pains. Now, I then had platinum blonde hair, and I hadn't looked at my schedule, and David had said to me, we've got to do something about your hair colour, it's a bit blonde. Now, I was living with my parents in Kent, and my mother didn't have this special stuff to tone down the brassiness, so she gave me a bottle of ink, liquid ink. And I'm a very obedient person. I didn't question it, so I poured it over my hair and it dulled it down. When I saw David on set on that Monday morning, he said, oh, well, your hair, yeah, it's dulled down, but it's a bit of an odd colour. Well, with that, the rain, I was standing on set waiting to take the watering can, and whilst I was waiting, the rain had come down, so we had to wait for the shot, and the ink began to run down my makeup on my face. And David said, oh, Therese, get her a headscarf. And that's why I'm wearing a headscarf as I'm watering the plants on the windowsill. That's an interesting little vignette that's never been told. I'm a bit embarrassed. So the second episode, which was, I think, the first series, but I'm not sure, black and white, then the showing up of Corporal Jones was the title to that episode. And I was Jimmy Beck, his girlfriend, Private Walker, the Spiff. And in the scenes that we shot, Jimmy comes to visit me, but I have to whistle from the window, and I couldn't whistle. David Croft said, oh, Therese can't whistle. I said, David, it wasn't on my CV, come on. He said, that's no good. And James stepped in, he said, I'll do it. So James did the whistle for me, which was so sweet, and we became very good close friends also, and we were like a little close family. And you know, he was adorable. In order to get a reaction from me when I stand at the door waving, he gave me a pinch on my bottom, which of course now would be very un-PC, but he was a lovely man, always full of laughter and always with a ready joke and always willing to help. Now we come to almost the most famous episode, or the one that viewers and fans seem to just love, the day the balloon went up. Well, we had no idea when we were trying to set the shots up and it was a complicated setup because Arthur Lowe was very nervous about heights. I was terrified of heights, and it was technically a very difficult thing to pull off. So we set it all up, and then we had problems then with the hay, because we were covered in hay, and myself and the young man couldn't say our lines because the hay was coming out of our mouth or it was stinging our eyes. And Arthur Lowe was getting quite rattled because he was waiting to take off. And eventually David said, well, we'll just have to play about with the hay and do your best. So when actually Arthur does collide, and the key line is, that was like the whole world shook. By then I had absolutely no idea, because Arthur hadn't collided into us, that was put in later, what the intention was behind the line. I know I'm an actor and I should have done, but there was no idea. I just thought it was a wonderful kiss, but of course we were very innocent in those days and I was very naive. So it's a perfectly innocent but funny piece of Dad's Army, which I'm so proud to have been involved in, and so proud to have had some hand in the great success of Dad's Army. So the most famous episode that the fans worldwide love and remember the most is an episode called The Day the Balloon Went Up. And I have a feeling that was shot in 1974. Now, location for all the, certainly the early Dad's Army, where you see the closing credits of them running across a shooting range, actually it was a live shooting range from the army. And when we arrived, Harold Snowd, who was, I believe, then the PA to David Croft, he took me to one side and he said, "Therese, I must be protective of you. This is rather dangerous. Be very careful where you walk." I said, "Well, thanks for adding that to the performance, Harold, I will." Well, of course, health and safety, although the act was enacted in 74, it hadn't been implemented, so we were to our own devices. So to set the shot up, we had the hayrick. That was the first thing. And I said to David, I can't do heights. He said, "Oh, shut up, come on, you're a professional." Now, in order to get to the top of the hayrick, out of shot, they put ladders. The ladders kept falling as we tried to climb up. The hay kept falling off. So these were complicated shots to actually set up. The hay went into my hair, into my eyes, into my mouth, and hair and makeup were like, and Mary husband, who was doing costumes, was worried about it going down my cleavage, and it was itchy, all the usual things that you're used to when you're an actor, but not so much the hay. Then I'm thinking, well, have they put the hayrick on any of these live rounds? My God, I'm going to be shot. I'm going to die. I mean, a bit dramatic. Well, when we eventually got to the top of the hayrick, then my goodness me, we just got into the hayrick and we fell out all that way down. Well, of course, no health and safety. You want the job, you want to help David and Jimmy. So we climbed back up this rickety ladder, all out of shot. And David said, "Well, we can't mess about anymore, we'll lose the light." And Arthur's getting his knickers in a twist because he doesn't want to be stuck up on a crane and swung into shot, which was actually dropped in after. So Arthur had to be kept happy, and we did the shot. However, I wasn't told that the reason for my final line when I emerge from all the hay, having been naughty, and remember in those days we were terribly innocent, we didn't understand a lot of double entendre, and I certainly didn't. But because I wasn't aware that Arthur was going to swing into us, which was dropped in after, when I said my line, oh, that was like the whole world shook. I hadn't any idea that the intention was that we'd been extremely naughty in the hayrick, and that what the young man had done to me had made my world spin. But it's a wonderful memory, and I'm thrilled to have been involved in such a fantastic, iconic comedy series. Well, on location, I do remember a lot of laughter. David was a very precise individual, but there was genuine affection and laughter that came across. And one day I was sitting waiting for one of my shots, and along came one of the contributors, an actor who had been a variety artist, and he drove up in a red Mercedes car. I was terribly impressed, red Mercedes car, but what more impressed me was the fact that as he parked, I noticed in the rear window he had a telephone. Well, I mean, this is the late 60s, I think. I'm like, wow, this guy's got a telephone in his car. Oh my goodness. Now, David, during a break, he'd come up to I'd come to get a cup of tea on the trestle table. And David came up to me and he said, it's going well, isn't it? I said, I hope so, for your sake, darling. It's very hard to tell, isn't it, Dave? He said, well, we've got some great stuff in the can. I said, have you seen Jackie's car? The red Mercedes? He went, yes. And? I said, he's got a phone in it, David. Well, David's ego rose to the occasion. He said, it's plastic, not real. Okay. So location was a fun time, and at the end of every day's shooting, all of us and the cast in our hotel, I think it was the Bell at Thetford, we would all then, having had a shower, certainly after the day the balloon went up, I needed a lot of showering of the hay to come off. We would then all meet for drinks and dinner, and we were a family, a company of troopers, and part of David and Jimmy's great team of comedy performers. Wonderful. And I've got to talk about Jimmy Beck, or James Beck, Private Walker, and I was his girlfriend. He was such a delight, and we would have a lot of laughs at dinner or at drinks after the day's shooting, and we'd all showered and come down and got ourselves done up. He would be quite flirty and say quite what I thought then were saucy things, and we became very, very close friends. He was a bit of a practical joker too. He really liked to play tricks on David particularly, and he'd say, that line I'm not going to say. Now, David was a stickler for lines. It was sacrosanct. You did not change David's lines. And he would only do it, Jimmy would do it just to get a rise out of David, and it worked every single time. So there would be Jimmy with his glass of gin and tonic, you know, another gin and tonic, and the more gin and tonics he had, the more he would rile David, till David was like, James, I can easily stop your contract, you know. And of course it was all just banter. But great, great fun. Ian Laurie kept himself very much to himself. Arthur Lowe didn't really mix with us very much. He would come down with his wife for drinks, but then they tended to go off and have their own meals. Ian Lavender was, I think Ian was a couple of years older than me, but I remember him being so nervous and overawed that he'd landed this part for David Croft and Jimmy Perry, and very sweet, gentle, lovely man. Now Arnold Ridley, I'm going to just go back a bit. Arnold Ridley, I did get to see on location, and we had a lot of fun because previously I had been a soap star in Emergency Room 10 on ITV, and one of the episodes that Arnold came in to do, he was a patient in bed, and I was the probationary nurse, the light relief comedy, who always got things wrong. For example, just to set this story up, I would be told to warm the blood in the sluice room. So I emptied all of the cartons of blood, mixed it all up, and heated it on the stove. And the nursing sister, she came, "What do you think you've done, Nurse Parkin?" I had no idea that that was the wrong thing. I threw away the urine samples, thinking that they were old flower water. So that's setting this up. So I am now told Arnold Ridley is this older gentleman patient in bed, and Sister Doughty says to me, "Nurse Parkin, I want you to give," whatever the patient's name, Arnold Ridley, "an airing." And I thought, oh, how lovely. So I got him out of bed, wrapped him up, blankets over him, into a wheelchair, and took him for a walk, thinking that that's what Sister meant. Give him an airing. And she saw out of the window me walking him, pushing the wheelchair, all muffled up. She knocked on the window. "Nurse Parkin, get in now." I got back in, I got the patient into bed, Arnold was settled. She called me into her office and she said, "What do you think you were doing, nurse?" I said, "Giving him an airing." She said, "No, you idiot, it's a rubber ring you put under the patient's bottom." And that was what Arnold and I used to laugh about, because it was one of the most successful episodes of Emergency Ward 10. So it was lovely to be with Arnold again and sit and have dinner and reminisce. Although it's very hard to pick out what would be my favourite episode and ones that I was particularly involved in, and I think I just did 3 for David, because in 1974-75 I went back to my homeland in Ireland and worked there in theatre and in radio. But if I had to choose, I'm afraid I have to say the day the balloon went up. It's the most fun I had, and arguably one of the more successful episodes that everybody today just makes them chuckle and they love it.